The rain hammered against the windows, a relentless downpour that swallowed the sounds of the outside world. Within the house, Emily sat curled up on the couch, her eyes glued to the pages of a mystery novel. The old, creaky house had always been her sanctuary, a place where she could escape from the chaos of the city. But tonight, it felt different. Tonight, the walls seemed to close in, the shadows longer, darker, and more oppressive. She was alone. Emily had lived in the house for years, inheriting it from her grandmother. The creaks and groans of the old wood were familiar, almost comforting. But as the clock ticked closer to midnight, the usual sounds began to morph into something unsettling. Something that made her pause, her breath catching in her throat. It started with a faint noise, barely audible over the rain. A soft, rhythmic thumping, like footsteps echoing from the depths of the house. Emily frowned, lowering her book. She strained her ears, trying to make out the sound, but it was gone. Shaking her head, she dismissed it as the house settling, a trick of her imagination. Minutes passed, and she returned to her book, but the words no longer held her attention. The noise came again, louder this time. Thump, thump, thump. Emily's heart began to race. It wasn't just her imagination. Someone, or something, was inside the house. She stood, the book falling from her hands, forgotten. The living room was dimly lit, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. The thumping grew louder, more insistent, coming from upstairs. Emily's mind raced. She hadn't heard the front door open, and the windows were all locked. But someone was in her house, she was sure of it. Cautiously, she moved toward the staircase, her footsteps light, almost silent. The thumping continued, a steady rhythm that quickened with each step she took. Reaching the base of the stairs, she hesitated. The darkness at the top of the stairs felt thick, almost impenetrable. Suddenly, the thumping stopped. Silence fell over the house, broken only by the steady patter of rain. Emily stood frozen, her breath shallow, ears straining for any sound. The silence stretched, oppressive and suffocating. And then, from the top of the stairs, she heard it, a whisper. Soft, barely audible, yet unmistakable. Her name, Emily. The voice was cold, devoid of emotion, and it sent a chill down her spine. She wanted to run, to escape the house, but her legs felt like lead. Slowly, she began to ascend the stairs, each step heavier than the last. The voice came again, louder this time, echoing through the empty halls. Emily. She reached the top, her hands trembling as she clutched the banister. The hallway stretched before her, shrouded in darkness. The doors to the rooms were all closed, but she could feel something, a presence, waiting for her. Gathering her courage, she moved toward the first door. Her hand shook as she reached for the knob, turning it slowly. The door creaked open, revealing an empty room. Her old bedroom, untouched and exactly as she'd left it years ago. But something was off. She could feel it in the air, a heaviness that made it hard to breathe. Emily stepped inside, the floorboards creaking underfoot. The room was cold, the air thick with an unidentifiable scent, something old and musty. She scanned the room, searching for the source of the voice, but found nothing. Just as she was about to turn back, the door slammed shut behind her. She jumped, her heart pounding in her chest. The whisper came again, closer now, as if the source was right next to her ear. Emily. She spun around, but the room was empty. Her fear turned to panic, and she rushed to the door, yanking it open. The hallway stretched out before her, silent and dark. She could hear her own heartbeat, the blood rushing in her ears. Desperate, Emily ran to the next room, flinging the door open. The bathroom just as empty as the last room. But the mirror, something was wrong with the mirror. She approached it slowly, her reflection staring back at her, wide-eyed and pale. But then, in the reflection, she saw something move behind her. A dark figure, barely discernible in the shadows. She spun around, but the hallway was empty. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her mind racing. Was she imagining it? Was this some cruel trick her mind was playing on her? The voice, the footsteps, the figure, they all seemed too real. With shaking hands, she reached for her phone, dialing the police. But as she brought the phone to her ear, the voice came again, this time from the phone itself. "Emily, you can't escape." The phone slipped from her hand, clattering to the floor. Her pulse raced, and she stumbled back, the walls of the hallway seeming to close in on her. She had to get out, had to escape this nightmare. But as she turned to run, the figure appeared again, blocking her path. It was closer now, the darkness swirling around it, obscuring its features. But she could feel its gaze, cold and piercing, as if it could see right through her. Frozen in place, Emily watched as the figure slowly raised a hand, pointing directly at her. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper, and the voice spoke one last time, echoing through the halls of the house. "You can't escape, Emily. You never could." And then, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the house into darkness. Emily's scream echoed through the night, swallowed by the storm outside. When the police arrived hours later, they found the house empty. The lights were on, the rain had stopped, but Emily was gone. The only trace of her was her phone, lying on the floor, the screen cracked, and the voice, still whispering her name. But Emily was never found. Some say she still roams the house, trapped between worlds, her whispers echoing through the empty halls, calling out for help that will never come.